Hello, welcome to my bookshelf, and today I'm very excited to finally film my wrap-up video because I just finished the last book on my TBR this month, so it's finally time to tell you how this month went. But good news, I did finish all the books on my TBR, so that's really exciting. And that ended up being 6 books. Well, technically 5.5 because I was finishing up a book from my last TBR that I wasn't able to finish in time. So let's just do a grand overview of the books that I read this month. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So, throwing some statistics at you. So like I said, I read 6 books this month, and that equaled 1,599 pages. And the longest book that I read was 372 pages, and the shortest book I read was 158 pages. And as far as ratings go, it was a pretty good month. I only had 1 2-star rating, and the rest were 4 and 5-star ratings. I had 2 4-stars and 3 5-stars. Another thing, which I found to be kind of interesting, is that I only read 1 female author, and the rest were all male. Another really interesting thing is the year that these books were published. I'm kind of all over the board this month. I have 2 that were in the 1950s, and specifically 1951 and 1950 itself, which is really random that I picked 2 books that just happen to be from basically the same year. That was completely on accident, and kind of a fun accident, if you ask me. I think it's fun to read old books as well. Well, sometimes. I read 3 books from the 2000s, from like 2000 to 2009. And then I read 1 book that was published 2010 or later, and that one was in 2011. And I tried my best to have a variety of different genres, and I thought I did pretty good. Then when I was kind of tallying it up, I realized that 3 of my books this month were in some way, shape, or form science fiction, but they were different types of science fiction. So I had 1 that was like this adventure science fiction, if you will. There was 1 short story collection that was science fiction, and 1 that was this dystopian future science fiction. So, unique takes on science fiction, not all the same. And then I also had a memoir, a mystery, and 1 magical realism. So let's just jump into the books themselves. So the first one, I actually considered not finishing it because I really didn't enjoy it. So obviously this is my 2-star read, and that is The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. I enjoyed the beginning and the very end of this book, but most of the book, including the middle, just dragged on for me. I don't know if it was just my mindset while reading it, but I really just didn't enjoy it. And I don't know if it's just because it's meant for middle schoolers. I just don't think that the writing was that good, and it was just kind of boring. And in the very middle, there was just this long info dump. As a reader, that's like really frustrating to read because it's kind of like lazy writing. I don't want to say that, but it kind of is. Like, if you have one character just rambling on, like giving you all this exposition, especially in the middle of the book, it's just lazy. I mean, can't there be a better way to find this information out, or at least tone it down? It was very long. At least if dragged on, even if it wasn't that long, I don't even know. But, and also in that info dump, he's talking about this magic show that he used to do when he was a child. And he talks about how in this magic show he would like play this like character of this like wise magician, and of course for some reason the magician was, I believe, Chinese. And what frustrated me with that was that part of being in character for this little kid is to pretend to be Chinese speaking broken English, which to me was kind of offensive. I mean, I'm not even Chinese, but I'm like, really? This is really uncomfortable to read. It was just really weird and not necessary, and that also just brought it down. I couldn't get over that. It was just so unnecessary. Like, as an author, you get to choose what your characters do and do not do. His character did not need to do that. I didn't think it was necessary, and I just thought it was rude. So, I didn't like this book. I gave it 2 stars. It just was not good, so that was really loud. Oh my gosh. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so the next book that I read this month was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. It was a library book, so I can't hold it up for you, but I will show a picture. This was actually the longest book that I read, but despite that, I felt it was really engaging throughout, and it was just a really well-told story. So, props to Ernest Cline. I gave it 5 stars. It was just really, really good. if you don't know, which you probably do, Ready Player One is about this future where virtual reality has been perfected, and the creator of this virtual reality, James Holliday, has passed away, and he has left the world with his video will, which mentions this contest to win the Oasis and all of his money, as long as you can find these keys, unlock these gates, and just complete all these quests. So it's this really exciting contest that's opened up to the whole world, and obviously everyone is super excited about this. So it's a really interesting story, and even on top of that is there's a lot of 80s culture thrown in there because the creator of this Oasis loved the 80s, so he throws in a whole bunch of references. Now, for me personally, I didn't get most of those references directly. Like, I hadn't, played those games or seen all those movies, but I could still appreciate what was going on, and I still really enjoyed this story itself, even despite that. So I think that really just goes to show how good of a writer Ernest Cline is, at least for me. So it was just a really enjoyable, and it was just a really fun story as well. So the next book that I read this month was Unsweetened by Jodie Sweetin. This was the memoir that I read, and this was just really good. If you don't know, this is mainly focusing on Jodie's struggle with drugs and alcohol addiction, so it's not like a normal memoir in that way, because from my understanding, memoirs tend to be more just about like fun things about their lives in general, like that people would want to know. Like, ooh, this is what it's like to be a child actor, and here's all the interesting things that happened to me, This isn't like that. It mentions what it's like to be a child actor for her a little bit, but only in the sense of whatever she needs to tell us in order to make us understand what she went through and how she was feeling and why she eventually turned to drugs and alcohol. So it's all this very cohesive story specifically about this addiction that she struggles with. And so in a sense, it is a memoir, but at the same time, it's a lot more than that. So I really appreciate that she used her memoir to really help people understand what it was like for her, and hopefully what other people also struggling with this might be going through as well. So I just really enjoyed this book. I just thought it was really well done, and yeah, I gave it 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I read this month is iRobot by Isaac Asimov. This was my science fiction short story collection, and it basically is all about robots and technology and humanity dealing with these robots. And it's actually kind of presented, like, each short story is almost like its own like logic puzzle that you get to figure out for yourself. So it's kind of unique in that way, and I do think that Asimov does a good job of explaining what actually was going on and how these characters solved it. It kind of does make a unique reading experience, because I feel like most books are not like that at all, but I do think that despite that unusual element, it was still a really enjoyable read, at least for me, and I do think it asked a lot of really interesting questions that science fiction tends to go into a lot, and I don't know, it was actually a lot of fun to read. The characters were kind of just straight up funny throughout and just amusing, and there's a lot of fun banter and things I would not have expected to read in a science fiction book, which probably says more about me than science fiction. But so this was a really fun book, and if you're interested in getting into science fiction, I would recommend it. So I gave it 4 stars. I docked it 1 star just because it is a short story collection, and there were a couple in there that just weren't as strong as the other ones that I probably wouldn't read on a reread, but I would say on a first read that all of them are really important to kind of really help you to understand this universe that we're delving into. So the next book that I read this month was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Now, I had never read this in high school, but I'm telling you, it is just so good. I can't believe that it wasn't required for me. It was just a really good book. This is more or less a science fiction dystopian, and this is set in this society where books are banned, and in fact, firemen don't put out fires, they start them to burn books. It's just written so beautifully and so well, and so there's so much imagery in here that you can really just see what's happening, and I think he does a really good job of painting the picture of what the society looks like. And obviously that can be kind of tricky when you're talking about a society that is different from your own. And this is really exciting because it was written in either 1950 or 1951, and a lot of the things that he's predicting in his future are things that I think are coming true today. Obviously not to this extreme, but the society that he describes is so much more than just banning books. It's just being so absorbed in technology and completely distant from the people who are actually around you, which kind of hits home for me at least. And there are definitely themes in here that our society today can relate to on a deeper level that the people reading this book when it first came out couldn't quite identify with, not completely. So this was a really good book. I gave it 5 stars, and even though this book is misleading, it's 158 pages. The last 100 pages of this is actually like other authors talking about this book. So I would just like to say that of the books I read this month, this is definitely my favorite. Okay, so the last book that I read this month is a book that I actually just finished today, and that is After Dark by Haruki Murakami. Now, this is the magical realism book, so this is going to be hard to explain, but I think I'm just going to give the most simple explanation that I can, and that is just that this follows a couple different characters in the span of one night, and it's how they all interact with each other. And some of them kind of like pass through the night, if you will, and some of them actually meet and get to know each other just in the course of this one night. I mean, there are some bizarre elements, hence the magical realism. So the thing with magical realism is that these strange things happen, and the characters realize that they're strange, but it's never explained, and it really isn't about explaining why this is happening. And I really think that they're just there to kind of help us reflect on the story that he's telling. This book definitely makes you think. It's very insightful. It's also a very easy read. And another thing that I love about Murakami is that all of his characters are so unique and well defined. Like, I feel like no one is a carbon copy of another person. They all have their unique personalities and their unique struggles. And I really appreciate that because obviously that's true in reality. We're all unique, different people. Another awesome thing about Murakami is that he clearly loves music, and so he just describes like what music is playing during each of these scenes, which also makes it a way more immersive experience, which is very unique. I've never seen a book do that quite as much as this. Like sometimes they'll mention like 1 or 2 songs here and there, but this one, I wrote them all down, and it's a huge list. Again, Murakami really wants us to be immersed in this world. I mean, music can change your mood, and so listening to this music while reading this book was kind of a fun experience. I didn't do it with all the songs, but when I did do it, it was really kind of cool in a way. I felt like I was there, like actually there. And it was just really good. This is a reread for me, which I don't do very often, but it was just so intriguing, and it leaves me with a lot of questions. And so obviously I wanted to reread it at some point, so I thought now would be a good time, and I still really enjoyed it. I feel like I feel about the same as I did when I first read it. It had been long enough where I didn't really quite remember what happened. I think that it's just a really well-told story, and it's very unique, and I really enjoyed having to read it. So I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that was all the books that I read in the month of April. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time.